Hello, everyone. Good day to all of you. Thank you so very much for setting some time apart amidst your busy schedule and joining us for this session. My name is Vivin Satyan. I've been working as a technology evangelist in the Active Directory team of AD Solutions for almost 9 years now. I take part in conferences, both virtual and physical conferences, and I talk about products, I talk about technology. So that's what I've been doing for the last 9 years, right? Now, the topic that we're going to be discussing today for the next 20 minutes is going to be role of identity and access management in securing the cloud. Okay? Now, let me make it really simple. Initially, when the concept of identity and access management was introduced in the market, it was all about authentication and authorization, right? Authentication is who, authorization is are you allowed to access something or are you restricted access to a resource within the organization? It could be an application, it could be data, or it could be any piece of information. Okay? That was the whole idea. But as time passed by or as years passed by, what happened is there were branches to identity and access management. Okay? And in one sense, identity and access management and IT security had to work in tandem, okay? Because you cannot think about one without the other. The branches of identity and access management, according to me, is not just two, but we have 7 different branches. Okay, starting from onboarding, API integration. You might be wondering why API integration? Because when you talk about identity and access management, it's not just about one solution. Okay, so even though you have an IAM solution in your office or IAM process in your office, now that process or application should be capable enough of interacting with multiple technology platforms and at the same time, different business applications as well. Okay, so that's why I believe API integration is really important. And the core process, which is authentication. Now, after authentication comes the self-service process. Okay, now self-service is something really, really new when it comes to on-premise. Okay, whereas for Microsoft 365 and other SaaS platforms, self-service is already there. But when it comes to on-prem, self-service is non-existent. Okay, you'll have to depend on a third-party vendor for self-service when it comes to on-prem. So when you actually try to self-service something, you'll have to ensure the right balance between security and convenience. Okay, again, self-service is also a branching of identity and access management. And then comes offboarding. So when the employees leave the organization, there's a change in job role, or someone gets promoted, okay, or someone leaves the organization, there's an exit. So you'll have to offboard the user either from one department or from the organization itself. And that process also has to be streamlined. You leave no stones unturned, in the sense like you don't want to make sure you don't want to leave something untouched. Okay, so if the user has his or her identity in 5 different technology platforms like Active Directory, Microsoft 365, Azure, AWS, and they have some SaaS applications, you want to make sure that you healthily on off both the users. Okay, and my favorite is delegation, because we know that Active Directory management, or for that matter, Office 365 management, is no longer just an administrator's task. So you have other people getting involved in the process. So there has to be a way by which we delegate the actions to other users in a very non-intrusive manner. Okay, and the last or the most important part of all when it comes to identity and access management is analytics. Now, there are 2 types of analytics. One is general analytics. Let me give you an example. So user details, group details, license details, permission details, and all that. So I call them general analytics. And the second aspect is risk-based analytics. Okay, so put it across in simple terms: who, what, when, and where. So answering to these 4 vital W's is also important. So all these 7 aspects together is what forms the complete IAM chain. And I have framed the agenda in such a way that we talk about these aspects, keeping the managed engines offering in mind. So I'm going to be talking about 4 important aspects of identity and access management. The first one being, now that most of us are working from the comfort of our homes, we'll have to think about password policies, especially if you have a hybrid infrastructure. You'll have to revisit the configurations of your password policy. The second one is, how are we going to, okay, password policy is one thing, but the second aspect towards better authentication is having a strong password policy, Of course, most of you would disagree with me because some of you are already going passwordless. But if that's going to be the case, that's not a problem. But the two important links, okay, the first link is being the password strength, and the second link being securing the user's access. Okay, so when a user visits an endpoint to authenticate, so how secure is the process? Is it just one level or multi-level? And if it's multi-level, how convenient it is for the users? Okay. Number three, with keeping in mind the IAM chain, is standardizing the process of user onboarding and offboarding via automation. Okay, so it's 2021, and people are used to Active Directory, Microsoft 365, Exchange, SaaS applications, and all that. So there are certain things that you do on a regular basis. So why not automate the process in a very controlled and effective manner? Fourth, delegation is all about delegating tasks to other users instead of delegating control or authority. Okay. Now, I told you that I'm going to be talking about these 4 points from a managed engine offerings perspective. So the offering that we have in the IAM space is AD360. Okay, so I'm going to be using AD360 as an example to demonstrate these processes. However, you will be able to take away some action items from this, even if you're not using AD360. Let's say you're using another solution already, you would still be able to take away some action items and put to use in your office. Okay, all right. Let's talk about the first aspect, which is authentication. Okay, now authentication, whenever I think about authentication, something keeps coming to my mind. One thing that comes to my mind often is old habits seldom die. Okay, some of you are going passwordless, but still there are organizations across the globe that use password-based authentication. Of course, they have additional years, but password is still there, and password is here to stay at least for the next 5 years. Okay, I'm not being too broad-minded or something of that sort. So password is here to stay. So as long as you have passwords in your organization, you'll have to ensure that the passwords are secure. Of course, you have MFA and all that, but password strengthener is another layer of security. Why miss that? Okay. Now, when you talk about passwords and password strengths, one statement often comes to my mind, and that statement is, a chain is as strong as the weakest link. And talking about the weakest link in IT security, you know who is the weakest link in IT security, right? It's you and me. Okay? So you might have firewalls, intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems. You might have state-of-the-art threat detection software, vulnerability scanners, and all that. But what's the point in having all that when the weakest link is still the people that you're interacting with on a daily basis? Okay, so it is really important for us to think about password security because, as I mentioned earlier, at least 60% of the organizations across the globe are still using passwords. Now, don't ask me from where did I get the 60% stats, but I talk to people in seminars and conferences, and I keep asking them this question: How do you think the future of passwords are going to be? Are you going to be using passwords, or are you going to turn passwordless? Well, the answer is 60 to 40. Okay, that's why I say 60%. So if you are still using passwords, okay, so you'll have to just focus on two things. One is your password has to be strong enough to not to be brute forced. The second one is it should not fall under the common dictionary attacks. Okay, so it's really important for us to understand to move from passwords to passphrases. Okay, of course, some of you might be already doing this, so I'm not going to spend much time on this. So just two important points. It should be hard to brute force, and then we'll have to think about the possible dictionary attacks, or at least the common dictionary attacks. Don't use compromised passwords. Okay. Now, this is for those who are still using passwords. Okay. So if you're not using passwords, that's a different story altogether. So if you are using passwords, now comes the question. Well, what you're seeing on the screen right now is your on-premise Windows Active Directory password policy. And this has been around for more than 15 years now. Okay. And we've been used to this. So a password should be more than 6 characters. It should have lowercase, uppercase, special characters. You should be changing passwords once in 45 days or 30 days or whatever it is. We know this, right? This is for the on-prem. Now, let's take a look at the password policy recommendation for Microsoft 365, not the on-prem, but the cloud. Okay? For Microsoft 365, we have a different set of recommendations, surprisingly. Now, what Microsoft says is, if you are using a Microsoft 365 account, well, longer passwords aren't necessarily better. That's one statement from them. Now, second one you don't require character. The third point is it is a complete contrast from what Microsoft has been preaching for the on-prem version. The third point here is don't require mandatory password resets for user accounts. So no changing passwords once in every 30 days or 45 days. You can have, if you set a password on day one, it stays there forever. Okay, so I was not getting the gist of all these recommendations until I actually read the fourth statement, which is ban common passwords, and then you have 6 and 7 points which stress the importance of multi-factor authentication. Okay, so we have your on-prem recommendation, and we have different set of recommendations for Microsoft 365, and you have your SaaS applications that your users are using, and you have your SaaS password policy recommendations. So you have at least 3 or 4 password policies that you'll have to satisfy if you're an IT administrator configuring the password policy for your users. Okay, so in simple terms, what should we as administrators think of is, number one, we'll have to think of a password policy that strikes the right balance between user convenience and security. Number two is you'll have to try and implement multi-factor authentication whenever and wherever possible. Number three, establish a secure single sign-on process, okay? Because users nowadays use 5 SaaS applications, 10 SaaS applications, 15 SaaS applications. So you'll have to have a secure single sign-on process in place. Number 4 is you'll have to enable controlled password synchronization wherever possible. Okay, so if you follow these 4 checklists, I'm 100% sure that your users will have a seamless password handling experience, and at the same time, without compromising the security of your organization. Okay, and if I were to give you a checklist to maintain in 2021 for passwords, okay, so how should you be thinking of password policies and what should you configure and all that? So I just have 3 points. One, you'll have to start thinking about securing remote logons, because people are working from home and people will continue to work from home from here on, because we see a paradigm shift in the way in which the organizations think, as in from where an employee should work. Okay, so people would be working on the go. So you should be always thinking of remote logon. Number 2, you should be able to implement credential-based attacks. You know the whole story: password spraying, dictionary attacks, brute force. Number 4 is you'll have to ensure that your credentials meet regulatory compliance standards. Okay, so with these 3 checkpoints in mind, and at the same time striking the right balance between user convenience and security, we will now dive into the aspect of how Manage Engine is going to help you with all these. Well, Manage Engine offers a solution for identity and access management named AD360. And AD360, one of its modules is the password strengthener modules, or the password self-service module. And that module helps you enable, or helps you think of a role-based password policy. Okay. Now, instead of explaining using the deck, let me actually show you what I mean by role-based password policy and how to cover the things that I just mentioned before, like setting a strong password, restricting common passwords, and all that. Okay, so the role-based password policy is really, really effective. So no matter how many password policies that you'll have to juggle between, let's say you have an on-prem password policy, you have your Microsoft password policy, you have your SaaS applications password policy. So we'll have to strike the right balance of all the multiple password policy requirements that you have in your organization. Okay, now the password policy enforcer does exactly that. Okay, but without touching, or without without actually modifying your existing password policies. That's the best part. So we help you strengthen the password policy without actually touching the core. That's the whole idea here, okay? Let me show you some interesting restrictions that you can enforce, okay? By the way, this is AD self-service module of AD360, and this is the password policy enforcer that I was talking about, okay? So let me log in, and if you'd like to play with the demo setup, it's available online, so it's demo.adselfservice.com. So after I log in to the tool, the password policy enforcer gives me the ability, okay, to decide or to arrive at a password policy that actually, keeps in mind all the password requirements that I have to fulfill before arriving at a final password policy. So the password policy enforcer right here, we have multi-level restrictions, okay? You can restrict characters, you can restrict repetition of passwords or repetition of characters or repetition of even passwords. And then we have restriction of patterns and restriction on lengths, okay? Now, you as an administrator can define your password policy here, and it's not just one size fits all, right? So you can have one policy for your admins, another policy for your technicians, and another policy for your contract employees. So you can have as many number of policies as you want, which you think is logically needed, and then map it to the right users, okay? Why have one single password policy and then map it to all the users, okay? So your HR and your, let's say, server administrator need not have the same password policy requirements, okay? So all this can be achieved with the password policy enforcer right here. And not just that, I told you that we'll have to focus on two links. The first link being passwords, the second link being multi-factor authentication, right? Now, this tool also gives you the ability to, to try your hands on at least 17 different authentication setups, okay? That includes almost all the common authentication setups out there in the market. Security question and answers, SMS, Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, Radius Authentication, Smart Card, YubiKey, even Active Directory security question and answers, okay? And since this application is also going to enable users to perform self-service operations like self-service for login, for resetting their own password and unlocking their account, you can also define the multi-factor authentication authenticators during the reset password and unlock operation process. And let's say the users are trying to log into their Windows machines or Mac operating systems or Linux machines, okay? All those are endpoints, okay? You will be able to decide the authentication factors even there, okay? And my favorite and the need of the hour, I believe, is VPN login, okay? Because people are working from home, and there's definitely a rise in VPN MFAs. And this tool, apart from securing your endpoints, this also secures gateways or tunnels. Okay, so when someone tries to establish a VPN connection to connect to the corporate network, there has to be a multi-factor authentication setup in place. Okay, so to put it across in simple terms, we help you with setting up a strong password policy, keeping in mind all your password policy configurations. We also help you with the second step, which according to me is really important, setting up a proper multi-factor authentication for all the users in your organization based on logics. Okay, it's not just one size fits all. We work on logic and then we apply MFA. Now, the third aspect and the very crucial aspect is users have, at least 5 different applications. So if you were to, give users the ability to log into a SaaS tool, all right? So we have to ensure that there has to be a single sign-on process in place, but at the same time, the single sign-on has to be a very secured process. So we support close to 120 different applications for single sign-on out of the box. And we also categorize them based on the verticals that you would be interested in. But the key point here is when you actually establish single sign-on for your users, the single sign-on attempt, let me show you something here, okay? The single sign-on attempt has to be something based on a policy, okay? And in certain times, even if you have single sign-on enabled for your users, some of the confidential application, you might want your confidential applications to be behind another layer of security. So you might want to implement an MFA even for your cloud applications. Okay, so we give you the option to secure end users login, to secure access to cloud applications based on passwords and also multi-factor authentications. Okay, not just multi-factor authentication like one size fits all based on logic. Okay, so that's the whole idea here. And also now that people are working from home, you also need to think about password support for remote employees. Okay, now the tool also helps you do that. So the tool helps you with password support for remote employees. So let's say that the users reset their passwords while working from home. They would want their cache updated as well. So we will be helping them with a cache update as well. Okay, so all this put together is what is called as AD360. So if at all you are interested in trying your hands out with AD360, so please feel free to drop a message, or you always have the email address right there on the screen, which is vivin.ks@manageengine.com. Right? I hope you found the sessions informative. And apart from this, if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot them.